last analog generation was your album a couple of years ago. There's of course a continued interest in analog. Actually, people are like ditching the digital stuff and like let's use analog. At the
Hmm.
same time, you have been pointing out there's a lot of new digital gear which is coming pretty close. You're even fiddling with the NAMM stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it sounds great. I mean, the thing to me is that like it responds like an amp, which I kind of found a bit elusive in the past with even the high end modelers. When you turn the guitar down, it doesn't do that cleanup thing as well. But this it does respond really well. The only thing is right now there's issues taking like NAMM live because you need to find something that runs it as at low latency. I mean, you could do it with a laptop and an interface, but you might as well just take a pedal both in that case. So, if you've got a small little multi-effects thing that can load NAMM at a low latency, I think that'll be pretty exciting for me.
And also, so I think live though you use your pedal board, right? But live in the sense in your gigs, your Blackstratblues gigs,
For
but in your
Blackstratblues gigs, yeah,
yeah.
I tend to go with the pedal board and more importantly the amp. I mean, I can do an entire gig without the pedal board, but you need a good amp. In fact, that first live album was recorded with that Soldano, and I was plugged straight into the amp. And after the amp, I had a couple of effects, reverb and delay, and some chorusing or something on a separate amp. But just that guitar going into the amp connection, there's something about not having anything in between. The more stuff you start
Right.
patching in, you can actually hear it. Like you take,
Hmm.
6 or 7 pedals and put them all on bypass and listen to what that sounds like. Then unplug from that and go straight into the amp, and then you hear the difference. And then
Right.
you'll know what you're losing.
So what is the like live difference in terms of gear? Because live you also use the Helix, right, for your effects instead of the
Yeah.
pedal board.
I mean, for me, the main thing, at least for a Black Sabbath Blues gig, is having those amps, on because the guitar reacts differently when you're playing silently. Even like in the studio when I record through a reactive load. So if you want, you can kind of just record silently. But when I turn up the studio monitors, there's a certain like connection that happens. First of all, you have to use less gain to get the same amount of sustain because there's a bit of a feedback loop that happens. When you're in front of a loud amp, like on a Black Star Blues gig, it's almost like controlling a raging beast. Because if you turn the guitar volume and tone knobs to full, the whole thing will just start feeding back uncontrollably. So it's almost like you have to very control the amount of that runaway process that happens where it can get away from you at any point. And sometimes I'm holding one note and it'll start sustaining on another note, like so so you have to be like really careful, and you can almost tell when it wants to do that, and then maybe find another place on stage to stand where those other notes kind of sustain the way you want them to. So people who were grown up playing modelers and digital recreations and haven't played the real amp, they would find that really like strange and alien. Not to say that one is better than the other. There's definitely moments like if I was doing a Bollywood gig or something, and there was like I've done a couple of Rehman tours and there were no amps on stage because I was standing next to the flute player. I was just on in-ears.
Okay.
And then I kind of asked them also, can I have a wedge, that also has just my guitar on it? And they're like, no, I don't think you can pull that off. And okay, fine, So then you kind of have just, live with it and make do. But in an ideal world, I would always have those amps, even if I was on in-ears. Like with Amit Trivedi, I was, listening to my guitar mainly on the in-ears, but I still had the amps going behind. So I'm a little old school that way. But like I've said, I've done gigs, without the amps. At the end of the day, I think I'll manage with, even if you ask me to play it through my phone or something, I'll do it. And I'll manage to sound not
Right.
bad.
Of course, you as
But
you say, the tone is in the fingers, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but then there's certain
Yeah.
processes and ways of
Right.
doing it that make you feel a little bit more connected to the instrument and a little more excited about the sound that you're hearing, and a little easier in that sense to express. Like if you're plugged into a sound that kind of compresses everything you do, you'll find it very hard to like make certain notes bark and jump out, or make them more subtle and stuff like that. Kind of makes the whole thing a little bit more homogeneous. So then I wouldn't say like everything that I'm saying, like if I were to speak like that, you'd still understand what I was saying, but it would be a little harder,
Right.
You'd still,
Right.
I mean, whatever I was saying would still be the same message and the same words, but you'd be kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
it wouldn't
Yeah.
be as instantaneous as you hearing it clearly in HD.
I want to ask you about rhythm, right? I mean, a lot of people, I guess, must have asked you about what scale, melodic, and your answer is usually, I suppose, uh, targeting the chord tones or over the chord changes, that kind of thing. But what about rhythm? Your approach to rhythm and groove? I also remember that with Zero, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a rhythm guitarist who used to not play rhythm very well, and that's who you replaced, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
There's
at that
actually
point.
two stories. The first thing is I used to be a rhythm guitar player, and
Yeah.
then the first guy we used to jam with, who was supposed to be the lead guitar player, he wasn't very good. So then I was kind of made to like, oh, why don't you learn it instead? Fine. Then I ended up doing a slightly better job. So that's what kind of got me into playing solos. But when we first formed Zero, we did have another guitar player, but we found it really hard for both of us to, I don't know, we kind of were just not used to, playing with each other. And then we tried to like, oh, are you doing this and I'm going to be doing that, trying to like solve that problem. Then he didn't come for one rehearsal, and then everything just sounded a lot tighter. I guess there was less stuff to think about, and you just did it. And then we noticed, okay, we're probably better off with just one guitar.
Right. How do you approach guitar layering, for that matter, multiple guitar tracks and that kind of thing?
With extreme conjuicy these days.
Okay.
Because with every layer you add, you're kind of losing space on the other one.
Right.
So it's like, the gig is paying 10 grand and there's only
Mhm.
two guys in the band, then each guy gets five, right? And if there's
Right.
four guys, then each guy gets 2.5. And then there's this eight guys, then, it keeps getting lesser and lesser. So that's the similar thing with guitar layers. If you just have drums and bass, like if you listen to Focus 3, at the point the first guitar solo comes in, there's nothing else apart from drums and bass. And that guitar
Right.
tone
Right.
is just like huge and, sustaining and everything. And then as it progresses, like the other layers start coming, and then the percussion comes in and so on and so forth. And you can kind of hear like that whole thing suddenly becomes part of the thing rather than just being its own entity. So
Right.
these days I'm very conscious about how much space I want to, take away from that initial part. And if the layering is part of the arrangement, then yeah. But then it also makes it harder for me to pull that off live. Then I have to, like say if I do a harmony guitar layer, then I have to make sure that I have some sort of a harmony effect or something when I'm playing live. I mean, there's no two of me. Like sometimes I wish I could clone me, like make 3 or 4 clones, and I'll only play this far. Okay, now go.
Yeah.
The With each layer you have to make sure at that point that it's actually adding something, because the biggest mistake is to put down every idea you have and then try to make sense of it in the mix. Because my thinking is your ears don't automatically get better 2 weeks from now, right? So why don't you just do it now and save yourself the trouble later? So I kind of almost mix as I go with each layer. I'll make sure that it's got the right amount of reverb or EQ or whatever. Sometimes you have to sculpt it EQ wise. But I've been using this program called Two Notes Wall of Sound, which is a speaker emulation software. So when I record it off the amps, I record the reactive load, just the without any cab or IR or whatever. And then as I'm listening to it in the mix, I can actually audition different cabs, which I found super useful. So for example, like if I have a guitar part that doesn't need a lot of low end or top end, and it just needs the mids to poke through in a certain frequency range, I will actually go and find the right cab for that. It may just be a 1/8 or something. So instead of using a 4/12 and then chopping all the frequencies, I'd start off only, because that speaker is kind of like a filter, right? An EQ filter. So then I'll go for the smaller cab, and then there's less work for me to do in terms of sculpting it. And also like by how much ambience you want to add, more reverb, more delay, or you want it bone dry, where it's in this direction. Like when I see a mix, the lows to highs I see this way, right? From ground to up. The stereo width is left and right, as is you would think it would be. And then from front to back, there's another dimension that you have to work really hard to achieve. And you can get that by, everything from EQ, compression, but mainly reverb and delay. So if something is going to be like this close to you, then you don't want to put too much of, ambient processing on it. Whereas if you want it like all floaty and hazy and stuff, you can go a little bit crazy with that. So I try to make all those decisions at the time of recording. And also these days, I'm not stuck with just one guitar, so I can pull out a few different, like even between two strats, they kind of have slightly different sounds.
Right.
So it's a better job for this one. It's like casting.
Right. You use a bass circuit Marshall 600. Is that right? The bass
No,
circuit, right?
no, this is a Plexi. It
Okay.
started off as a 50-watt bass circuit, but then I modded the second channel to be a lead one. So now I plug either into, because the Gibsons sound better into the lead circuit. It's not a full blown because what happened is as Marshall kept on evolving, the players wanted more and more gain, and they also wanted it tighter and brighter. So they started chopping off a lot of the bass that was part of the original designs.
Oh, okay.
And the bass circuit didn't change. The bass circuit remained the same over the years.
All right.
So if you listen to a lot of guys like, Gary Moore,
Right.
because the first Marshalls were pretty much Fender Bassmans, right? They just use British
Oh, yeah,
parts.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm aware of I'm aware
Yeah,
of that.
so this is kind of in that, Fender Marshall hybrid
Mhm.
kind of thing. Whereas that lead channel is more, classic plexi. It's got all that snarl and, it doesn't flub as much. Whereas I find the bass circuit is great for pedals because like a Tube Screamer, for example, will cut all that low end. But the only thing is I run the bass control on zero. Bass is zero, middle is full, treble is full.
All right. That's okay.
That's the rest. It just seems to
Yeah.
work that. And I
Mhm.
haven't changed it for like when we did the Gear House videos, I had just got
Mhm.
that app. And it was loud, man. That thing. It was like
Mhm.
super loud, running to two cabs. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess if there's one amp I'd choose, it'll probably be a Marshall of some sort.
I used to look at your pedal board pictures and try to, okay, let me try this max one. Okay, what setting is it? But obviously, it'll sound nothing like that because I'm using whatever that multi effects
You
thing.
can
So.
actually get very close with the Helix these days because
Mm-hmm.
for all the Bollywood gigs, I started using that Helix effects, which kind of made my pedal board like into a box I could just put into a guitar case. So the Maxon thing sounded really good on that. They had a Timmy, which is kind of like the genre I was using at the time.
Okay,
Then
okay.
the Arion chorus, Univibe,
Hmm.
and then
Okay.
you have your pitch and delay and reverb and all the other effects.
I also wanted to ask you, like, so you're doing your mixing and all. I mean, for your recordings, but how, like, live? How is it different live? And I mean, you're not the FOH, right? So.
Live, I put a lot of trust in getting the right guy at front of house. From Fali, who's someone that I've known from like back in the Zero days. In fact, for the Zero days, his band and my band used to tour together, and I would mix their band and he would mix ours. So as long as someone like that of that caliber is at the front of house, I don't really have to. I'm not second guessing and doing their work for them. I leave it to them. Now, if they have a certain idea of how my guitar is going to sound, then I mean, I know it's not going to sound bad because it's starting off as something pretty good sounding on stage. So it's kind of hard to F that up. And a lot of guys, they spend a lot of time on the drums and they'll make sure that kick drum is the biggest sounding thing and then they'll wrap the whole mix around them. But if you try to do that with us, it doesn't work that way. So you kind of have to make sure everything works. In fact, I would say the most important element would be the bass. And there's very few guys that actually get understood what that bass sounds like in our music. Like some of them just want to blow it up and make it like a very sub heavy kind of thing, which shouldn't be. A lot of that bass is the mid range. Most of the like rock music is all mid driven till the 90s. In
Right.
any case, there was no way of reproducing like serious low end, which is why then I guess from that point you found a lot of electronic music then became popular because then you were able to reproduce those frequencies on a recording medium. Whereas if you
Okay.
put it onto cassette, instantly you've lost like this much
Right.
low end,
All the.
and vinyl you can't go below a certain frequency because then the needle skips. So
Okay.
which is why a lot of people say, "Hey, why don't you put out your stuff on vinyl and everything
Vinyl.
now?"
Yeah.
The best possible way to consume it is high definition, lossless files. You can download them on Bandcamp. I don't have to make CDs, which are actually a lower resolution. I mean, if you've got a decent enough audio interface and some good headphones, that's probably the best way to consume at least what I've put out so far. But there's always the nostalgic element of putting the vinyl on the
Right.
turntable. I mean, it's kind of made a comeback. So maybe at
Yeah.
some point I will get the albums mastered for vinyl and then put them on. I don't know.
I think you used to talk about how in your childhood, like there was this approach where you put down the album and you listen to the whole thing. While over
Mhm.
time, the way we consume music itself has fundamentally changed, right? Yeah.
Dude, now it's become like less than even 1 minute, because the attention spans
Right.
become so. And I noticed the same thing happened to me also. I mean, you start going on Instagram and scrolling, and before you know it, you've just like wasted half an hour of your life that you'll never get back. I kind of have to like take these periods where I delete Instagram from my phone and only have it on the iPad to do my, usual social media obligations. But I'm not tempted to, every like 2 minutes open and see now what's happening and who is doing what. I mean, there's more to life than that, I would think.
Right. Yeah. So even you're not immune to the traps of social media.
I notice it with me, then I'm like thinking, oh, dude, if this is happening with me, one old Buddha uncle, can you imagine what the kids
Yeah. Right.
are?
Okay. So I mean, you've been in New Zealand for I think quite a few years. So how has your career changed in that sense, session wise, and all that stuff, back from when you were in Bombay?
Obviously, like the recording work has slowed down in that sense because they have to really want you on the track to, send it to you and then work on Zoom or something like that. I mean, most of the people prefer to work in person, and I totally agree. There's a total different vibe about, being in the same room and reacting to the same things at the same time. Unfortunately, even the laws of physics can't, there's a certain distance, so there's a certain latency. I mean, you can work that way. But off late, I've been doing more than the session work. I've been doing some scoring work to film. So I did a couple of documentaries, which may be out like in the next few months or something. So hopefully, if that can lead to more work of that sort, I'll be really happy if that works out. With regards to like gigging here, obviously it's much smaller than even the indie scene in Bombay, like where you can play an antisocial and what 500 people or something land, just if you announce it on Instagram. Here the gigs are a lot smaller, so unless you're at a certain level, which right now I am not, then you end up playing club gigs and stuff like that, which are cool. It's good to have a jam with your mates and that sort of thing. But in terms of any sort of career aspirations, there's none of that in that sense. So I guess also it takes a bit of time to network, and I'm really slow at networking because like I make connections with people really slowly, and those that I do form connections with have like lasted years and decades almost. So I'm kind of very open to how my life is right now. I don't really have any clear cut goals saying, okay, this is how it should go. I'm open enough to say, okay, I'm just going to do the best that I can, and then whatever happens. You can only control your life so much. At the end of the day, people I think and they try that they have a 5-year plan, but how the fuck do you even know if you're going to be alive in 5 years? These days anything is. I don't know if the planet's going to be there 5 years in how we know it. It may be there, it may be very, very different. I guess also after like COVID and everything, I became a lot more, open to just doing what I can, and then things are not in my control. I just see how they go. Also, like at this age, also you find it hard to have that energy. Okay, I'll sleep in my van and we'll play the gig and all. There's none of that now. It's like
Right.
little bit past that. So once, like I remember, like zero, the kind of conditions that we would endure just to play a gig, that kind of was, it's never going to be there. You're never going to be 20 again. So, maybe if I can help some kids or something with their music, that'll be cool.
Yeah, that'd be
I mean,
great.
let them sleep in the van and all, but I can help them at least.
Right. And I'm also not asking you, what do you feel while you're playing, right?
I don't even know. I close my eyes and hope for the best. I'll just do that.
So I have some cheesier questions. So, artists you'd have to listen, if you just had to listen to one artist for the rest of your life, which artist would it be?
Well, I did listen to the Beatles between the ages of 8 and 13 exclusively,
Okay.
right? So I
Okay.
didn't
Oh, wow.
a
Okay.
strange thing. Yeah, but I just knew that I had to kind of, get to the bottom of this. And so then I think after the Beatles, the first thing I listened to was Guns N' Roses. And then shortly after that, Led Zeppelin and, all those. I don't know. I'd guessed between the Beatles and Hendrix, there's like
All right.
heaps of depth in the music that sustains repeated listenings. But I could also like say a band like Steely Dan or something like that. It's just like oral candy. I don't even think that I would even land up in such a situation, like when I'm just left with one cassette
Of
on a
course.
desert
Yeah.
island.
I know that you're not too fond of the modern prog bands kind of thing, Pliny and all, but is there any artist who has the blues touch in any of the artists you like by any chance?
There's a younger guy called Marcus King who
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
really good couple of albums, like say around 5 years back or so. He's still pretty young. And guys like Matt Schofield and all those Josh Smith, Kirk Fletcher, that generation, they're probably closer to my age. But like there's this young guy in Chennai called Amitav Gautam, really good
Yeah, yeah,
guitar.
I know. Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah, I know him
slightly
because of you,
older.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, great guitar player, man. And like I wish I could play that good when I was that age. And then like guys like Kush Upadhyay, Rhythm Shaw, I mean like that
Right,
is
right.
like especially Kush, like his writing is really matured now to a point where it's like as good as anything else that's out there. The guy's name was Hank something. I'm friends with him on Instagram. Really good guitar player. I mean, must be in like early 20s or something like that. And it's almost like, little bit of Allman Brothers, some country stuff, some bluesy stuff, very, very rootsy. And there's this other guy called MP Gannon. Man, he just sounds like a mini Derek Trucks. And he plays beautiful slide guitar. He just sounds like a, soul singer or something, just like Derek Trucks does. But the funny thing is, like, Derek Trucks was kind of like the best slide guitar player I've heard, like, since, forever. I mean, maybe apart from Jeff Beck, which is a totally different style. It's funny because young kids have grown up listening to that, like I grew up listening to the Allman Brothers, and they're only going to take it further, which is amazing. All the
Right.
stuff that we think is like this is the best ever. It's not going to get any better than this. There's young kids being born today that just think that's the norm, and so obviously
Right,
they have
right,
to, push that further, which makes me just really
right.
hopeful and happy.
As people age, of course, your view changes, your musical taste change, and you had a lot of, more faster kind of playing, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, even you just mentioned there's a lot of young kids who are becoming, I mean, technically incredible. So,
Mhm.
what is the role of, even Rick Rubin was mentioning this, the role of, what he would call taste, or, being aware of music in a holistic context versus getting the technical skills of it. Yeah.
It depends what the music needs, to be honest. Like if you're cooking South Indian food and you don't have like coconut or something, you're going to be in trouble. Whereas if you're maybe cooking a pasta or something and you don't have coconut, you're fine. It just depends what you're trying to do. If your music requires like a certain amount of honesty, then you better be able to reach deep inside and pull that out of you. Whereas there may be some other kinds of music that may just require you to play something in a very proficient manner, and that is what will carry the music across in the best possible way. I mean, it's always good to be able to emote no matter. I mean, there's guys like Andy Timmons and everything. Like he's got all the chops in the world, but he can still move you to tears, with whatever he plays. So there's always guys like that. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I think what happened is also like during the 80s, there was like an arms race to become the fastest and, most chopsy and stuff like that. And then that whole grunge thing, which was like a backlash against that. So it almost became like
Right.
a bad thing to be able to be proficient. And a lot of players kind of got sidelined because of that. And it's kind of funny to see bands like Extreme making a comeback now. Because I always thought like they were one of the most technically proficient bands, but they had heaps of, good songwriting skills. And they had an album called Waiting for the Punchline. Speaking of Extreme, that was a huge turning point for me because till that point, like in terms of especially production and stuff, I wanted everything to be like tighter than everything knit properly in place. And then I heard that and it was so raw. And they were shredding their asses off, but it was so raw. And you can tell that, it was like more loose and off the cuff. And I could relate to that on a very emotional level. So that kind of pushed me almost in the opposite direction to develop that part, which didn't require me to think as much. Sometimes you'd want to craft a solo, you want to like take your time writing it line by line to a point where like people can sing it. And sometimes
Right.
you just want to blaze your way through it, like chopping your way through the woods with a chainsaw or something and seeing, the trees are, falling. And then you go above and look at, oh, now the trees have fallen in a very nice aesthetic way. It's something like that. So I these days I'm more open to either way. You can I think you should be able to do both. You should be able to play with the correct technique and everything like that, but you should also be able to just channel whatever you're feeling. I mean, if you listen to Hendrix, for example, like there's notes that are out of tune and the timing's a bit weird and stuff like that, but it doesn't really matter, does it?
Okay, I'm just going to close with two questions. What are the upcoming releases? I mean, yeah, you just had an album in 21, but upcoming releases, independent releases.
The second live album came out this year, and I'm probably gonna do a third, a volume three.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
and I want to put the Gear House stuff, just remix it a little bit better and put it out on streaming because a lot of people seem to like those particular
Yeah, yeah.
versions. And then I'm actually sitting on like 2 albums of original stuff, which I have to like. Now it's that time where you need to stop writing and actually start, arranging
Right.
and that process has just started. And rather than putting out like one album, because they're kind of different. One is a little bit more, not really synth heavy, but there's a lot of that kind of a production where the drums are not really live, they're more programmed. And, you know, using more computer-driven sounds, because that's kind of what seems to be the connecting line between those bunch of songs. And then there are some like really bluesy and stripped down songs which I do want to put out as another album. So I was kind of thinking like side A, side B. And I was like, these days people don't have time to listen to the whole song, let alone like I put out 16 songs on Hindsight is 2020, and I don't think I'll ever do that again, just because I'm aware that times have changed and people don't really have those kind of attention spans anymore.
Right, but you might as well try that. Like it could be like a new marketing thing. And
No, I did
just
it once. I don't think I'll do it again.
All right.
No, because
So
I kind of you on Spotify you can see like which songs have the most streams, and it's almost like people started listening to the album and then slowly so you can see the attention waning. And by the time it comes to the end, there are some really good songs there, but they didn't really get,
Right.
as many listens as I think they may have. Sometimes what happens, it takes like a few years, for like trends to shift, and then people suddenly pick up. Like there's this one song called Come Anyway on the
Yeah, of
third album,
course. Yeah. I love
which
that.
I don't know anyone even heard that song, and then suddenly all of a sudden like that kind of shot up in it tells you which are your most streamed songs and everything. I was like, oh,
Right.
that took a while, but I'm glad it did.
Yeah. Okay, my last question, a general open-ended question. So, you had mentioned, I think, long ago, and still, what genre of music you play, or what is your genre? And it was good, honest music. So, what is good, honest music for Warren Mendonsa?
You know the meaning of the word good? You know the meaning of the word honest?
Right.
It's stuff that you are connected enough to say, okay, this is me, this is who I am, or at least a snapshot of you at that point in time. And also, hopefully, stands the test of time. It's not just a fad that people listen to like Gangnam Style and then it's gone.
Right. Right.
So as long as people keep listening to it, as time goes, even like way after I'm gone, I think then my job would have been well done. And I just hope it's good enough, to send. I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, it's pretty honest, because I don't really put out stuff that to chase trends. I haven't done a dubstep song or whatever, the trend chasing stuff. And maybe if the trend is something that I do enjoy, then
Right.
cool. As long as that's something that you honestly are connected to, and you feel close enough to that kind of music to, put your large part of yourself into it and release it. Yeah.
On that note, thank you so much, Warren, for this long conversation, and really, really appreciate it. And looking forward to your gig. And have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much, Warren, for joining us. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you soon. Thank you so much, Warren. Bye.